السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. نقل عن الإمام الحسن العسكري عليه الصلاة والسلام: علامات المؤمن 5: صلوات 51، زيارة 40، والتختم باليمين، والتعفير الجبين، والجهر ببسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. A hadith from Imam Hassan al-Askari has been narrated that states that there are 5 signs for a believer. Number 1, the person recites 51 rak'ah of prayer, which includes the obligatory prayer, Salat al-Layl and Nawafil. The second is Ziyarat al-Arba'een. The third, having a ring on his right hand or her right hand, and putting one's forehead on earthly material, as well as saying Bismillah in daily prayers loudly. This hadith is part of, I believe, 2 hadiths that specifically talks about Ziyarat al-Arba'een or Arba'een. We have huge literature that talks about Ziyarat al-Imam al-Hussein in a general sense, but to speak of Ziyarat al-Arba'een, as far as I can recollect at this stage, there are 2. One is from Safwan, who narrates from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq salawatullah wasalam alayhi, and Imam gives him the text of the ziyarah, which should be recited, recommended to be recited tomorrow morning, inshallah. And this hadith from Imam Hassan al-Askari that says a believer has 5 signs. I want to start with a proviso, and that is most of these ahadith should not be interpreted literally. It doesn't mean if I have a ring on my right hand, immediately I become a mu'min. Or if I say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim loudly in my daily obligatory prayer, I have become a mu'min. We really need to find out, engage the hadith, find out the context under which this hadith was said, and then we find out exactly why and what it means. Tomorrow is the day of Arba'een, according to our calendar. And literally, Arba'een means 40. And in this context, it means 40 days have passed since Ashura. So the 20th of Safar becomes 40 days that have passed since the day of Ashura. And for those of you who started Ziyarat al-Ashura, the Arba'een days, tomorrow, inshallah, you should finish, or at least tonight you should finish, if you have been continuous with it. Arba'een has gained significance within the Shia community for the past at least 2 or 3 decades, particularly in Iraq, where Shia community congregate to go and visit. In the past, when I was a child, we used to walk between Najaf and Karbala to go for ziyarah, but it did not have the kind of significance that it has today. So it has gained huge amount of significance. But we went in the past year and the year before, started from around 2003. After the fall of Saddam, we began to see 2 million, 3 million, and then every year going up to 25 million. I'm not quite sure what is going to happen in the context of the COVID-19 this year. But the signs that I'm seeing and the number of people that are going indicates that huge crowd are going to turn up already, or the roads to Karbala is literally packed with a sea of people that intend to go for ziyarah. And during this period, pilgrims go from all over the world. In the past, it was from, say, Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, Middle East. Now, mawqib and groups are going from United States, Europe, Africa, Far East, Middle East. They all congregate over there to say homage to Imam Hussein salawatullah wasalam alayhi, and to remember the sacrifice and everything else that we talked about during Ashura. During the 10 nights of Ashura, I spoke about the event of the whole uprising of Ashura and what happened as unparalleled in human history, particularly when we talk about the kind of characters and individuals that were present during this, the whole event. So what is, I mean, if somebody asks, yes, granted, these people go to Karbala, they visit, what is behind the story, or what is the story? The story, according to books of hadith and others, is narrated in a way that although it has become popular, but there are some question mark by a number of scholars regarding some components of the whole story. The story goes that 40 days after Ashura, one of the great disciples of the Holy Prophet, and after that, Amir al-Mu'minin, Imam Hassan, and went on until at least he was alive till Imam Muhammad al-Baqir salawatullah wasalam alayhi, by the name of Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, one of the mystical figures that well known within the Urafa. He was blind, and he went to Umrah or Hajj, and after hearing about the event of Karbala, on the way back, he traveled to Karbala and finally arrived in Karbala on the 20th day of Safar. And how the story unpacks itself with regard to Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari is in Mafatih al-Janan. You can go to Mafatih al-Janan and look at the story. He goes to Furat, takes a ghusl, changes, and because he is blind, there is somebody else who is assisting him, takes this person to the burial site and the grave of the Imams, and sits there to do his dua and ziyarah. At that particular moment, according to the tradition, at least accepted tradition, that Ahlul Bayt, which means Zainab Salamullah alayha, Imam Zain al-Abidin, and the rest of the family, they arrived in Karbala at the same time. And they meet with Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, and they offer the first ziyarah and prayer on the grave, and then the Imam Zain al-Abidin and Zainab Salamullah alayha, they bring the heads of all the martyrs back to bury within the grave that has been dedicated to them. By the way, as far as the graves, at least there are one or two ahadith that says Bani al-Asad, which was a tribe close to Karbala, after 3 or 4 days of Ashura, they decided to go gingerly at night to go to Karbala and to Maqtal area and bury these bodies, so they were already buried. I don't believe any of the scholars that we have would question the purity of the sentiment expressed by these millions of people that are going to go to Karbala. No question asked. But when it comes to kind of looking at it analytically and looking at the hadith, scholars have stated or at least expressed few questions. If you break the story that I just mentioned, break it down into its components, Ziyarat Arba'een, we have ample hadith and literature regarding the ziyarah itself. That's no question. As a matter of fact, we have a hadith from Ahlul Bayt that we really need to visit or at least do ziyarah and remember Imam Hussein on a daily basis if it is possible. That's why some of the grand scholars would do Ziyarat Ashura on a daily basis, not just for 40 days, every day. So that is highly recommended. I don't believe no doubt regarding the actual recommendation for ziyarah. The coming of Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari go for ziyarah on Arba'een, again, although some people may have doubt about it, but it's neither here nor there. The critical point for the scholars that question the story of Arba'een is the return of Ahlul Bayt from Sham to Karbala. And there are a number of scholars, Allama Majlisi, for example, Muhaddith Nouri, within my own contemporaries, Shahidi, Ayati, Rayshari has got a book, 14 volume or 16 volume about the life of Imam Hussein, and I believe volume number 9 addresses this from an historical point of view and looks at various document and evidence. And Marhum Mutahari and others. They say if you look at very possible path from Kufa to Sham, it would be highly unlikely that after going to Sham and staying there for 10, 15 days, if not more, they could make it back to Karbala to reach there on the 40th day. Because they left Karbala on the 11th and they reached Kufa on the 12th. They stayed there for around 3 days until Ibn Ziyad decided to send the family to Sham. The distance through the desert, right across, if somebody takes literally straight line from Karbala through the desert to get to Sham, you have close to 600 kilometers. And those days, speed, cars and everything else was not, so they were camels, horses, and they had to travel between station to station. If most of the stations they stayed at least the night to travel the next day, it makes the journey from Karbala to Sham at least between 10 to 15 days. So by the time they reach Sham is already around the end of Muharram, if not the beginning of Safar. 15, if they spend 10 to 12 days to get to Sham, that's close to the end of Muharram. If longer, then that takes them to Safar. And again, historians have claimed that Yazid kept Ahlul Bayt at least for 10 days, the minimum, and some people say 20 days or 3 weeks maximum or a month. If they stayed around that period and they wanted to come back to Karbala, it's going to be way beyond the Arba'een, which we are talking about regarding the coming of Ahlul Bayt. So either they have come the next year, 62 after Hijrah, but it has not been about that issue. So that said, I just wanted to mention it in case when you read some of the literature, you will come across some debates regarding, yes, whether the likelihood, possibility, or otherwise of Ahlul Bayt coming to Karbala. That debate is been going on. There is a book written by Marhum Qadi Tabrizi, over 750 pages, that looks purely at this historical concept, look at ahadith, and argues one way or the other. So these people, they say that, but at the same time, there are a number of other scholars that said no, adamant about the fact that the story, as it is narrated, it actually took place. Ahlul Bayt came to Karbala. But for me, when I look at Arba'een, I don't think about whether Ahlul Bayt came or didn't. I'm not worried about whether Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari reached Karbala or it didn't. My approach to engage the literature is the same as what we did during the 10 days of Muharram or 11 days of Muharram. To look for something within the event that I can apply, bring the Arba'een or Ashura. Arba'een is a commemoration of the message of Ashura. Arba'een means Ahlul Bayt, that according to Bani Umayyah, they were beaten and broken on the day of Ashura, came back victoriously. Is there anything within this message that we can apply to our time? That's what is my concern. Not whether Ahlul Bayt came or they didn't. This argument cannot be settled one way or the other because, as they say, the jury is still out. Every group claims that one way or the other, and they all provide their evidence. Marhum Shariati once said in the past, he said, the message that we really need to get from Arba'een and Ashura in general, Arba'een as well, is that alternative reality that Imam Hussein is providing. Either live as the Holy Prophet instructed with dignity, or if life with dignity is not possible, die with honor as Imam Hussein has showed us. One of the two. And if we want to focus and approach and engage the literature to dwell around this concept, we really need to dispense with the idea of who came, who didn't. Focus on the principles that exist. Arba'een becomes, if we have a huge number of tyrants over the years, they have tried their best to kindle and destroy the light of Arba'een and any commemoration that takes place for Imam Hussein. Mutawakkil al-Abbasi is well known. Raised the whole memorial sites to the ground and planted hashish, which means in the literature of hadith, means grass. Turned the whole area into grassland, so nobody will go and visit. There were those who actually had to go, insisted on going there, and they had to pay by cutting, even some scholars debate this, cutting an arm or something in favor of arriving there, assuming that this is correct. The flame of Arba'een survived the battering of this many years, centuries, if not the millennium, because it is a tale of courage, selflessness, and generosity. Can we learn from it? In a world where the battle between justice and injustice becomes increasingly intense, the power and the arrogance, the tyrant and the arrogant people, they do as they wish. And the poor, the needy, the destitute, the marginalized have to suffer as they must. To quote, I'm sure Brother Ali might remember, one of the Greek historian, Thucydides, that became the father of the realist school of international studies. The rich, the powerful enjoy themselves and they do as they like. The poor, the marginalized, and the weak have to suffer as they must. In such a world, such an environment, Ashura stands up as a phenomena to teach us that there is an alternative to this kind of approach. It's a different paradigm. What's the paradigm? قُلْ, we get it from the Holy Quran. قُلْ هَلْ تَرَبَّصُونَ بِنَا إِلَّا إِحْدَى الْحُسْنَيَيْنِ. You fight us, you want the worst for us, two of the best options are open for us. Say, what you are expecting for us is nothing but one of the two good things: martyrdom or victory. But we are expecting from you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends you a punishment from Him or death in our hand. This paradigm, would that encourage us in this intense struggle between justice and injustice, particularly in this country? Is there enough lesson within Karbala and within Arba'een that encourages us motivates us to stand up in support of justice and against injustice? If it does, then we have learned something from it. If it doesn't, then fundamentally we are. Can we really learn from Ashura and Arba'een? Arba'een, in addition to remembering us the moral values of Imam Hussein and those who fought with him, is a political statement as well. It makes a political statement. Why Saddam, for example, during his time, forbade any commemoration? Because in the past, pilgrims have used Arba'een to make a strong statement to the powers to be, the occupiers, the tyrants of the time, whether it is Mu'tasim, Mutawakkil, Saddam, or US occupation, or ISIS, or Al-Qaeda, which is the addendum to US occupation. What it says that when we want, no matter how powerful are the strongs and the tyrants and the powerful, we should not falter in the face of oppression. Hayhat minna dhilla. When the choice is between capitulation, allowing the tyrants to gain what they want, and zipping up our mouth in front of justice and saying nothing, Imam Hussein says, As-sakitu anil haqq shaytanun akhras. Those who keep quiet and say nothing and allow the injustice to prevail, then they are, to a degree, a muted shaitan. We have a responsibility. One of the political philosophers has a book that you cannot be indifferent in front of a runaway train. And this is our position. When we see injustice in our society, when we see dysfunctionality in our society, what is our responsibility and how should we behave? But we are inspired by Ashura, we are inspired by Arba'een because they teach us, there are certain moral values in here that we really have to apply to and implement in our life. Arba'een or Ashura stands for sacrifice for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Are we prepared to sacrifice? Even little bit of discomfort. Imam Hussein salawatullah salam alayhi says, الناس عبيد الدنيا والدين لاعق على ألسنتهم, that people are slave to the material life and they pay lip service to the faith. They play with it so long as this faith does not intrude into the comfort space. But if it does, قَلَّ الدَّيَّانُونَ, very few will remain faithful. So are we prepared to sacrifice something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? If we are, we have learned a lesson. Live the life of freedom, free from ego and everything else, and no submission to any power. Remember again on the day of Ashura, this was the message. Ya shi'atu ala Abi Sufyan, in lam yakun lakum din, wa la takhafuna al-ma'ad, fakunu ahraran fi dunyakum kama taz'amun. Live free. Think of your conscience. Allow yourself to think positively. Significance of Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar, something that doesn't exist anymore in our society. Staying loyal and committed to your moral values. We very quickly dispense with them. Other people gave their life for these moral values. Standing up for what is right and against what is wrong, falsehood. It is never too late to do the right thing. Hur becomes the example. An army officer in charge of a battalion stops Imam Hussein from going further towards Kufa. On the day of Ashura, the spark suddenly comes. And he says, I found myself between Jahannam, hell, and heaven. between fire, punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and reward. And I wasn't prepared to go towards the punishment. He comes towards Imam Hussein and asks Imam Hussein, despite everything that I have done, is my tawbah accepted? Imam says, yes. So here, it's never too late to do the right thing. We all have committed sins. Let's make a start by changing and starting again. Remain steadfast in your struggle, whether it's internally or externally. Hur had to go through this internal struggle. Ego wants him to remain as an army battalion chief, but yet there is another path. Forgive people for the greater good, as Imam Hussein did. Everyone that came in, despite everything that, Yabna Rasulullah, even Yazid, when he asks Imam Zain al-Abidin after he delivered the sermon in his palace, and he said, that can my tawbah after what I have done be accepted? He said, if you really repent, yes. So these are some of these values that we really need. I mean, it's literally glaring at us within the event of Karbala and within the event of Ashura. How many of these are applied in our life? Whether it is in our political stance, in our theological stance, in our moral stance, ethical stance, in our relationship. These are the one that takes us closer to the goal and aspiration of Ahlul Bayt. There is a hadith that I believe it's from Imam Hassan al-Mushtaba alayhi salatu wassalam. He said, on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to curse those who claim allegiance to the Imam, and yet their behavior is in marked contrast to what the Imam does. Shouldn't we step back and reflect? Unfortunately, what happens in most of these majalis that we're going to have is the continuation of Ashura, nothing more, nothing less. But the fact that Ashura as an event, momentum event, stood for certain values, and how many of those values can be applied in our lives, that's the critical issue. Inshallah, tomorrow night I will take randomly few of these that are relevant to our life here, and discuss them and unpack them and see whether we can implement them in our life. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.